earthquakes, tornadoes, and hurricanes. When you gotta move to different parts of the country, you're gonna experience the weather too. Now, last night, we rode out the storm here in our home of Helene, Hurricane Helene, and it's my first hurricane experience here down in Florida. Now, we are very lucky. We don't live near the coast. We live kind of central, so it was heavy winds and heavy rain all night. And it was quite an experience, I'd say. Out of all three things that I've lived through, the hurricane is a little more concerning because how long this one lasted last night. It was just seemed like it was just kind of gradual and just kept going and kept going. And that's a big difference between my first experience. Now, I grew up in the state of Virginia. And while we'll have, occasional weather moments and would have, storms and things like that, it wasn't like a traumatic thing. It seemed like weather was fairly stable there. We did have occasional snowstorms. I remember having 12 inches of snow when I was a kid one time, and we did have, bad thunderstorms, but nothing like those three things I talked about. And my first experience out in California having an earthquake was, man, that was kind of scary. So I'm living in Hollywood and living in this one-room apartment with my roommate, John Billings, another fellow Virginian. And we're living in this really terrible apartment off of Hollywood Boulevard. I mean, it is a complete dump, right? And it had these big, sliding, windows. And I think we were up on the second floor. And then there was a parking garage, a parking garage, and then first floor, and then second floor. So these windows really didn't block or anything. There's these big, weird, sliding, windows. We kept them closed because, man, frankly, the smog and everything in Hollywood was just kind of unbearable for two kids from small town Virginia. So we're in this apartment, and I remember, it was early one morning at 5 a.m, and we were both asleep. John had the bed, I had the fold-out sofa, and we're laying there, and all of a sudden I hear what sounds like somebody outside the two windows just, and I wake up, I startled out of my sleep, and I look, and I see the windows buckling and going back in. It's like they were folding. Now, this must have been some kind of earthquake glass or something, because they didn't break. But I woke up and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And we're both like, dude, and it's it's an earthquake. And you're like, oh man, and it stops, right? And you're like I said, it felt like somebody outside the window just trying to bust in the window. And so you're like, oh God. I mean, you just about have a heart attack because it wakes you out of a deep sleep, and you're scared. It scares the crap. The building's rocking and the windows are going, and you're like, oh God. And then it stops, and you're like, oh, okay. So you lay back down, and then all of a sudden it's just these aftershocks, and it's and it's just, man, it was so unnerving. And through my time in Los Angeles, we had more little small earthquakes, but that was the biggest one that I felt and experienced while I was out there. And I left 2 weeks before the big Northridge Quake, so I dodged a huge bullet. out there, but I still had my family, not family, but I had my girlfriend out there and friends out there, and man, they were going through it during that. That was a crazy, crazy time. And to hear stories about, houses, collapsing, and my girlfriend's cats were like caught in the water, was running down the street, and the cats were in the water, and just crazy, crazy stuff. But 2 weeks before the Northridge Quake, I moved to Tennessee, and Tennessee is prone to tornadoes, and I had never experienced a tornado. Being from Virginia, it would be a rare thing that you would experience. Now, you'd have experienced the after effects of, say, a hurricane sometimes on the coast of Virginia, but usually, even by the time that gets up there, it's not much to deal with. But man, the tornadoes in Tennessee. Now, I remember the first time I experienced a tornado was the big tornado, and this, I'm guessing, was around 96 or 97. I'd have to look it up to know exactly, but a huge tornado rolled through downtown Nashville, was busting out windows in the skyscrapers downtown, and then rolled down to East Nashville, and just took out whole streets, took down some old style houses, took down some trees. But the crazy thing was, at the time, I was working on an album in a little small studio off of Music Row. And this studio, the building was owned by Steve Cropper. And we had put together like a little kind of independent record label, and we would record these projects. Well, we got hired to work with this artist out in California, but they brought him to Nashville, and so we put together a recording session and played on this guy's record. So at the time, the studio that we were working in was kind of like in a basement of this big building. Those buildings aren't there anymore. He sold them a long time ago, but the studio was kind of in this basement. And when you were in that basement, you had no idea what was going on in the outside world. So I'm at home, I'm in my apartment, and I turn on the news and I hear all this stuff about this tornado, and I'm like, and so my phone rings, and it's the guys down at the studio, and they say, "Hey man, yeah, we're working on this right now. Why don't you come on down? Why don't you come on down, studio?" And I'm thinking to myself, don't you guys know there's a tornado? But I didn't say anything, and I just thought, well, I would like to keep working on this album, and I was young back then. I was probably 28, 29 years old. And so I go, okay, yeah, I'll be on my way. So I get my little Honda Civic. It was probably a 1982 Honda Civic. And this was the year, probably 1996. So you get an idea of the vehicle I was driving at the time. And so I start to drive downtown. Now, my apartment was on... it was off of Murfreesboro Road, across from a bar called Silverado's. And people will know that's not the greatest area, but I got on the freeway and started heading downtown. And as I'm rolling in downtown, and there's kind of this loop where it can split off to East Nashville, and then it could split off towards Music Row, I see the tornado, and it's going through the skyscrapers. And I see it in my cars. The wind is very, very heavy. And I literally see this thing rolling through downtown. I'm like, holy crap. These guys have no idea that this is going on right now. And I had no idea how bad it was going to be. But I took the road that kind of veered off to the left. And the tornado was headed towards East Nashville. near where some of my friends lived. And this, over the years, this seemed like a common path that tornadoes would take. It's almost like Nashville's little tornado alley. And so I go down to the studio, and those guys have no idea what's going on. And we just go in, and I start, recording or doing whatever we're doing, or mixing or whatever we were doing on this project. But then I later learn of all the devastation of East Nashville, taking out all these old trees down on Eastland Boulevard, and, damaging homes and all this kind of stuff. And I just had no idea that it would do all that. And the fact that I saw the funnel going through downtown as I was rolling into town. It was just mind blowing to see that. But, the town recovered from that. And, it was a big thing at the time. And, Nashville was not the boom town that it is now at that time. And then my most recent, I had two recent experiences where that same sort of tornado alley, a tornado hit. I'm guessing this is probably around 2021 or 2022 or 2020, somewhere around there. Another tornado came and went down East Nashville and tore up a ton of businesses in East Nashville, and rolled on down to where was it? I believe it was near Old Hickory. It ran down Old Hickory and tore up a bunch of stuff, and went down and went further down. And I'd say that one was probably even more devastating. And I can remember watching the news the next day and seeing one of my friends, a bass player, Aaron Hatmaker, and seeing him on the news. And he's just like, wow, man. Wow. They had him on the news, like his reaction. He's just like, whoa. Wow. I'm just like, dude, I'm texting him, dude, you're on the news, dude. And man, it was crazy. And then the last tornado that I dealt with, I had moved out to Hendersonville, Tennessee. And so I was probably about 15 miles from downtown. So I was a little further out. And my wife called me. She was at the gym, and she was with my daughter at the gym. And she texted me and said, hey, I'm going to order some food for dinner. Will you go pick it up? And I'm like, yeah. And so I had been upstairs working on some music or something. And I get in the car and I turn on the radio, and it was on the local talk radio station. And they're starting to say, yeah, this tornado's going to be really bad. And if you're in Hendersonville and all this, I'm like, holy crap. And the sky is just dark. And I had no idea this was going on, because I was in my room with my headphones, and I'm jamming out and playing on somebody's track or something. So I get in the car. I'm like, man, I got to hurry up and get this food. One, because, the power could go out. And so I start hauling ass down. What's the area? I can't think of the name of it now that I don't live there, but it's all this little area with all the restaurants and stuff. And it was straight out from our house. And so I could get to the steak place, and I get the meals. And I start to drive home, and man, the sky was so dark. Even when I saw that tornado roll through downtown, it wasn't that ominous. This was serious. And I'm listening to the radio, and they're like, beep, beep. The tornado warnings are going off. And they're like, get into shelter now, get into shelter now. And as I'm driving home, it's getting darker and darker and windier and crazier out. And I literally I dealt with the traffic. I didn't drive crazy, but man, I got to the house, and I pulled in the garage, as they're going, it's coming to Hendersonville, it's coming to Hendersonville. And I pull in the garage and shut the garage and go inside the house, and I go, I got the food. I go, it's crazy out there. It's crazy out there. And so, we sit down and we start to, get like maybe 1 or 2 bites of steak, and boom, the power goes out. And man, you're just like, you're hovering in the dark, and then you're realizing, okay, what batteries do we have? What flashlights work? All of those things that you really, I try to be very prepared for these things. And my wife thinks I go overboard with it. And I don't really, because I know that if you're without power for several days, man, 1 pack of batteries isn't going to last long if your radio is your lifeline. And so, we couldn't get the radios to work. Only one flashlight worked, and I'm like, you know what? We're getting an F minus for our preparation for this. And so we all kind of holed up in the bed, me and my wife and Mia, and we're kind of just sitting there, and I've got my phone, so I turned the phone on the local talk radio station. I was able to get it over the my cell phone service, and so we're listening and hearing what's going on. And I think maybe after an hour and a half or so, the power came on, but the tornado had rolled through Main Street in Hendersonville, and man, took out so many businesses, and there were so many trees down and stuff all through Hendersonville. Man, it really, really took the brunt of that storm. And it was, man, driving home through that was the closest I ever felt to like really driving into the center of something. It felt like I was driving into the vortex of a tornado. It was absolutely crazy. So in comparison to those previous events, this Helene experience for me personally, and where we're located, and like I said, when we planned to move down to Florida, I was like, hurricanes are a real, very dangerous thing down here, and they're not to be taken lightly. And I said, I don't want to live near the water. Let's get somewhere on dry land and be somewhere kind of central in the state to hopefully keep us safe. And man, I hope everybody is safe through Helene. And it is my first experience with a hurricane, and it is not to be taken lightly. The thing that really struck me was how long these things are. A tornado seems to kind of, you've got a short window, and it's like a burst storm, and the cyclone kicks up, and maybe it continues for a while, but eventually, after a half hour or an hour or so, it seems like it dissipates and just turns into a storm. And with this hurricane, man, it seemed like it went on all night long. I was middle of the night hearing the sliding, the storm, the screen doors, the wind blowing them and slamming them into the other side, and you're hearing the wind gust, and you're seeing the light poles outside, going like this from the wind, and the rain just coming down hard all night. It's nothing to take lightly. But when you're having to live in different places, and you will experience different weather events, and man, living through earthquakes and tornadoes and now a hurricane, man, it can make you very thankful that you survive these things and live to tell the tale.